Welcome to today's Parenting Special Needs Live. Today we're going to be talking about sleep. Why is sleep such an issue for our loved ones? And what can we do to help our children and our families get some sleep? I'm Chante with Parenting Special Needs Magazine, and I thought we should bring these questions to a sleep specialist or a sleep consultant. So I reached out to Melissa Doman, a sleep consultant for special needs families, and asked her if she would advise us on how we can get our children and our families to sleep better. So please welcome Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
Hi,
Please,
Chante. Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, like you said, I am a sleep consultant for kids with special needs, and I help families day in and day out to help them all get a better night's rest. I've been doing this now for 4.5 years, I think. Uh,
Hi, you
so
learned a lot.
Yeah, so it's been great. I've been able to work with a lot of families from all over the U.S., the world, and helping them get a better night's sleep.
So what would you say are the first steps?
Great question.
Let's just start. Let's get to the heart of it.
Yeah, sure. So usually my first recommendations that I ever send to any family who's inquiring, I usually have them start with looking at the amount of screen time that their child with special needs gets, but also looking at physical activity as well. Both of these things have to be in balance in order to make sure that sleep can come more easily and more consistently at night. And certainly with everything going on with COVID and virtual school, virtual therapy, like a lot of kids are getting much more screen time than they usually get. And I find that for a lot of kids with special needs, it's not just like cutting it off at a certain time. It's actually that accumulation of screen time throughout the day that can really affect sleep, and it's almost like it overcharges the battery, so to speak. So obviously cutting it like an hour and a half before bedtime can be really helpful, and that alone takes parents a lot of the way there. But sometimes you have to look at the amount of screen time during the day as well. So I usually try to have my parents cap it at like an hour to an hour and a half altogether. And again, I know that's like a little challenging right now with virtual therapy and everything like that. But ultimately, when that starts to get put into place more and more consistently, my parents will report back to me saying like they're having much fewer nighttime wake ups. It's easier for them to get to sleep at night. So that time to fall asleep is reducing as well. And of course, like physical activity, we all know that the more energy you burn, the more likely you are to take that next nap, that next sleep at night. But I do find that for a lot of kids with special needs, it's not just making sure that they're getting enough. It's actually you have to make sure they're not getting too much, because I've seen a lot of times where kids are getting actually a little bit too much, and you can see on the log as parents, start to evaluate that sleep. That yeah, we went over 2 hours today, and Harry woke up 6 more times tonight than he did last night when we only got an hour and a half of physical activity outside or anything like that.
Okay, so that's what I wasn't clear on. So you're saying like an hour and a half of physical activity. What were
It,
you saying? The hour and a half, is that the
hour and a half was for the screen time.
okay?
Physical activity, this is kind of dependent on the child. I mean, I've had some kids where if they go over 30 minutes, it actually revs things up a little too much.
Okay.
But I've also had kids where they need like 3 to 4 hours of physical activity, stimulation, therapy, etc., to keep their sleep on track. So screen time is a little bit easier to like pinpoint. So cut it an hour before bed. Make sure that you're trying to cap it as best as possible at an hour and a half. But physical activity, that may be something that parents actually just want to start writing down and seeing if there's any correlation between that and nighttime sleep.
Right, tracking it a little bit to kind of see.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we started this off and we asked that, but and but my mind kept thinking, the question I had was, why do our children have, why do special needs children, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but why do they have such an issue with sleep? Like, why is it such a problem for our kiddos?
Hmm.
Do you know?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think that for a lot of special needs parents, they're some of the things that they see at night seem so unusual and a little like a little worrisome to say the least. I mean, I have some kids who are up 4 to 5 hours a night every single night at 5, 6 years old, and parents are like, how are they even functioning the next day?
Right.
Um, but in my experience, it kind of boils down to a few different things. I mean, we have, regardless of what a child's diagnosis is, we have something neurodevelopmental going on. And we have this tug of war between, a child maybe from a development standpoint, there are certain functions that they haven't developed yet, which makes it harder for them to get that physical activity, to get that stimulation. But you also have Mother Nature on that other side saying, hey, this kid's 3 years old, they need this much activity, like we got to go, 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 go. And sometimes what that does is it just gets all the wheels stuck for sleep. So that's when you start to see multiple nighttime wake ups, big long wake ups during the night. And there's all sorts of other things that can go into that as well. A lot of the children that I work with who are on the spectrum, who have been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, and of course, kids with sensory processing issues. If during the daytime, from a sensory standpoint, they're not getting the right kind of stimulation, the brain is going to go to sleep agitated and say, nah,
Mm.
I didn't get enough. So at 2 a.m., that's when the brain's going to say, all right, I need this kind of stimulation right
Wow.
now.
So interesting, right? I mean, it seems so simple, but it's like you don't think of those things.
Yeah, and it's something that I've just learned over time, and having talked to enough families to say, like, yeah, at 2 years old, all of a sudden, my kid was waking up at 1 a.m. and they were just ready to party. And to hear that enough, it's like, okay, maybe there's something else going on here. And what I have found it like is, if we focus on those daytime activities and give and make sure the brain has that stimulation it needs,
Mm.
um, those big like I said, those big long wake ups, multiple wake ups, they gradually just started getting better and better until they were resolved. And if your child can go to sleep at night with like the book kind of closed on the day, the brain says, all right, I got what I need. Now I need tonight to organize, compress, clean up, all that stuff, to be ready for the next day. Yeah.
Because it is really, I learned this too about the brain, and you probably know more. But the brain, the sleep, it actually, like the brain does like release a lot of um, like what? How did they say it? Kind of like it trains almost, you know?
Yeah. And actually there was a study a couple years ago that showed, now like imaging is so good that it showed that cerebral spinal fluid is going and like washing the brain a few times a night, and it's getting rid of debris, plaque, etc., which
Wow.
not just for kids but us adults as well. Like we
Right, everybody.
we need that sleep to do that.
Right.
And of course for kids, like the brain is constantly growing, changing. It's, in a lot of ways, it's like a piece of Play-Doh. So at nighttime, the brain is organizing memories and things that it learned from the day. It's creating stronger bonds between brain cells and everything. Like it's unbelievable what the brain does at night while sleeping. And I think once parents kind of understand that process, they're like, whoa, okay, yeah, we need to make sure we're getting plenty of sleep. Especially like, I know, I mean, there are kids who are on 3, 4, 5 different therapies, and if their brain is not having that time to kind of stew on that information, it's only going to go so far. So yeah, sleep is a vital part of any therapy program or anything like that you're doing with a child.
Help them thrive, which I think is part of your
Yeah.
saying, you say, right? A better night's sleep so the children can thrive. Okay, and so what are your I just want to ask about melatonin. We hear that a lot. We hear about the others, medicine sometimes have to be prescribed. Uh, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say that obviously I understand that for a lot of parents, you've probably hit a point of desperation of like, oh my gosh, if we could just get one more hour, I would do anything. And I think a lot of times parents resort to melatonin and they're told by their doctors and their specialists, like, okay, let's try this prescription. And yes, in a lot of cases that does help. But I think a lot of parents spiritually and kind of intuitively don't necessarily want to rely on those things.
Right.
And I when I first talk to parents about their experience and what has been told and recommended to them, very often I think a lot of doctors and specialists just say, hey, listen, I don't, this is just part of the diagnosis, this is just what to expect, here's some melatonin, here's some prescription thing, and then they, shuffle parents out of the office. And I mean, I've had kids where they've been on 5 different medications, but really all they needed was like a lot of focus and attention on their sleep schedule, their routines, the, encouraging independence. And once that was resolved, medication was magically just not needed anymore.
Hmm.
And I think it's unfortunate to me. I mean, I think a lot of kids aren't given that chance. And I think most professionals just kind of assume like, oh, they're not going to understand sleep training. Oh, we can't do that. It's because of the genes. That's why it's happening. And I think for a lot of parents, it feels kind of disheartening and disempowering. So when parents can kind of take the reins and just say, hey, you know what, listen, we're fixing this problem, we got to solve the sleep. And yes, maybe it doesn't work quite as quickly as a prescription medication, but what you're doing is you're building a lasting foundation for better sleep for years to come. And the idea that you could do that without needing a medication or without needing to use melatonin night after night, I think for a lot of parents, that's a really exciting idea, and it can happen for sure, for
So
sure.
what would you recommend? Like what okay, so go over the steps again. Like what do parents what would you say? How do we do this?
Well, ultimately, I'd say probably like 90%, maybe even a little bit more of the kids I work with, obviously there are those needs that have to be met during the day, whether it's sensory, physical, nutritional changes, whatever those needs are during the day, we have to make those changes to support the brain and let it do what it needs to. But often for a lot of kids, they've never really been given the chance to develop their own strategies to go to sleep. And we all have our own ways to get to sleep. Like I know for me, I have to lie on my left side, my arms are in a certain way, but I don't depend on anybody else to make that happen. And for a lot of children that I've worked with, they still need mom or dad in some way, shape, or form, whether that's dad or mom have to be in bed with them, they have to be held. Some kids, it's just having mom in the doorway to watch them go to sleep so they feel secure and safe. But once you take that away, they're not able to do it on their own. So you have to gradually start teaching them like, okay, first of all, it's okay to be on your own. This is how we're going to do it. And I think again, for a lot of kids with special needs, obviously depending on where they are developmentally, the prospect of saying like, oh my gosh, my kid can actually be independent with this, like that is huge. And once a child knows how to do it, it opens the door to being independent and all sorts of other things. And I think once you have a good focus on both of those, chances are you're going to see really nice changes and more consistent changes with your child's sleep. But like I said, in most cases, it's not just exclusively one thing or the other. You
Right.
have
Yeah.
to do both to get the changes that you want.
Yeah, no, what you said, like all of it makes so much sense. What I'm getting from it, and you can correct me, but they have to get the right amount of input, whether it's food or nutrition, as well as their energy out exercising during the day in order for everything to kind of work together so they can. And they have to kind of know how to soothe themselves a little bit, right? I mean, it's kind of like,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
exactly. And the way I describe it to parents is like, if I were to take your pillow and blanket tonight and said, "Hey, go to sleep," you would have a very hard time doing it. And it's just because for decades you've been reliant on those two things.
right.
So, and if you went to sleep with those and somebody yanked them from you middle of the night, if you woke up and they were gone, you'd be very startled. Number two, you would immediately get up and look for those things. So for a kid who's dependent on a parent to go to sleep night after night over and over again, they're going to have that same experience. And for a lot of children who have those heightened sensitivities, whether it's hearing, tactile, etc., um, that is such a startling change that it's very hard for them to settle back down from that. So once you start to address that, and again, those things during the daytime, the nervous system gets to calm down a little bit and say, like, oh, okay, no, just we're up, we're in bed. Now it's time to go back to sleep.
Right.
And it's not going to be perfect every single night. I mean, I get it. Like there are some times where kids are developing those milestones they finally need to get, and the brain's like, nope, it's 2 a.m. I got to work on this right now. But I think if parents are just sticking with it and being consistent with their expectations and holding their child to their best when it comes to their sleep, even down the road, like those milestone changes, they'll just be a blip on the radar compared to totally derailing the train, so to speak, when it comes to sleep.
Yeah, because you hear like some families, I mean, I've seen on Facebook and everything, like weeks on end with no sleep. And it's like, and I know, I mean, I can remember when she was younger, it was, torture. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah. Okay. So, and now where would people find you if they wanted to, reach out?
Sure. Well, you can always find me on the web. My website is melissadomansleepconsulting.com. And that's also my Facebook handle. On Instagram, what's the handle? Special Needs Sleep Coach. So if you look for
I
that,
like that.
yeah, that'll come up. Mhm.
So leave us with one action step that you think would be the best for families that are really struggling.
Um, well, look, I think my actionable step for the last like year and a half has definitely been watch the screen time and get that physical activity. And I think for a lot of parents, that's not like a groundbreaking recommendation, but it's one of those ones that if it's really done consistently in the right way, you are going to see those changes. And what I want to say is that for a lot of parents out there, chances are you're thinking like, oh, my child's moving all day long. They're just boom, 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 all over the house. But just keep in mind that maybe that's not like the most organized physical activity. So getting outside, doing that walk, it's more coordinated, it's more rhythmic, and that's
Mhm.
what a brain and body that's constantly on the move. That's what it needs. So just keep that in mind with the physical
And maybe
activity.
sometimes just being in nature, right? It has a
Yeah,
calming effect. It's like in our DNA that we need it. So yeah.
absolutely.
So, well, I can't thank you enough for sharing. I thought that was very a lot of things that you said I thought were very interesting because I hadn't really thought about it that way. As far as putting, making sure that they've gotten enough movement for the day so that their brain can relax, and also even the fact of that as they're processing things, that could be stimulating their brain during the night. I mean, I know like sometimes I get up in the middle of the night and write something down, but you don't
Yeah.
even think about little kids. I don't think about kids doing that, but they don't even have the tools to know like, hey, something's bothered. So
Right.
interesting. So that was really eye opening to me. So I appreciate that. So
Thank you. Thank
so
you.
thank you. And I really appreciate it, and I hope that we can all help families get a little bit of a better night's sleep. So
Absolutely.
we'll talk
Absolutely.
to you. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.